Hello, Southwest Campus. I hope you're having a great weekend. I'm really excited for what you're in store for because we're kicking off a brand new series. It's called Wisdom in a World of Chaos. And we're going to talk for 3 weeks about God's wisdom and how it's better than the wisdom of the world. And I'm really excited because you're going to get to hear from your campus pastor, James Hauser. And James shared some things with me about his message for this weekend. I'm excited. I'm using some of the stuff that he shared with me because it was so good. I know how much you love James. This guy is a pastor to pastors. He has a pastor's heart that you've experienced yourself there at Southwest. And I know that today will be a special blessing for you as he encourages you and challenges you. So please welcome your pastor, James Hauser.
All right. You know, it's funny that Stephen shares something, about me and listening to stuff. And I know that some of you are like, oh yeah, he's so spiritual. He just all the time. What he didn't tell you is I don't know how to read. And so Bible on audio is all I got. So it's, but in all seriousness, I know that I do different things because I have disciplines in my life that aren't as strong as they should be. And I also struggle to sit still. And so a car forces me to do that. And so that's what I do. And the other thing is cool is now I know what Jesus sounds like. I know what Mary sounds like. Rahab, now that voice. Woo. And so some of you are like, Rahab, who's that? Well, she was a prostitute, just so you know. So anyhow, but it's fun. I love when they share stories like that about me and make fun of me. I think it's awesome. So, hey, this morning we are talking about wisdom in a world of chaos. And here's what I know about the world that we live in. There are lots of different voices that we can listen to, and that is real. You turn on the radio, you hear people talking and giving opinions. You turn on TV, you get opinions. And of course, depending on what station you listen to, you'll get contrasting opinions and you'll get truths, quote, truths from both sides, right? And we're like, somewhere in between there's something's not true. And so we get that. We have people who are constantly speaking into our lives, who are saying different things. And so we hear all kinds of different voices and all kinds of different influences and all kinds of different beliefs. And depending on which voice we listen to and what belief we listen to, we will begin to head down some sort of path because we follow the path of whatever it is that we believe to be true or the influences in our life. And so we have to be aware of what path we are heading down. Several years ago, I went to my brother's house who lives in Columbus, Ohio. And we go there, either there or somewhere every Thanksgiving. And so we were there at Thanksgiving time. And it just so happens that my family is one of those weird families that enjoys Black Friday shopping. Any Black Friday shoppers in here? Some people are like, yeah. So, but we do. Every year we get up and, we go out on that day before and we get the newspaper, and we flip through all 700 ads to find out like where we should go, where we should land. And my favorite store is Meijer. I love Meijer. I'm in Meijer all the time. You'll see me there. And we decided, hey, let's go to Meijer because they have this item. We all agreed that we all wanted this particular item. So Meijer it was. We set our alarms for 4:30 in the morning. We got up that day. We headed to Meijer. We were there at 5:15. It was awesome. There were hardly any cars in the parking lot. We're pulling in. We're walking up into the store. And when we get into the store, I decided that I was going to ask the lady who was working there if she knew where this particular item was. And I was so impressed. She said, yes, I do know where that is. I was like, you do? And she's like, yes. She's like, you will need to go down here and to go to the back corner of the store. And I was like, awesome, And so I was like, I can't believe she knew, they never know where stuff is. So, I was like, here we go. We're walking out. We were walking in there and we start walking back to the back of the store. And there's that orange fencing, right? You know that orange fencing? It's up all around and it set this parameter around all the stuff that was there. And I was like, oh, sweet. The item that I want is in there, as well as every other item in the ad. Back corner, back behind here. And in my brain, I thought, this is a great idea. This is awesome. Not only will I be able to cash in on the item that I was wanting, but any other item that I wanted in the ad is right here, and I can just throw it in my cart, and off we go. Well, that was great in theory. The problem was, about 10, 15, 20 minutes before the whole thing, we were open to go get it, about 1,000, 1,200, 2,000 of my best friends all show up with the same idea, with the same directions. Oh, we know where your item is. It's in the back corner. And so that little plastic fence that was being held up by little yardsticks, as people are reaching over and starting early to pull their stuff out, is falling down and people are trying to pick it back up. And then, you already knocked it down. Just grab the item. But they're like, pick it back up and as if it's fair. If you can touch it, it's yours. And so anyhow, it was ridiculous. We were watching this, and as people were pressing in, there was no line formed. And I told my brothers, I said, guys, there's so many people here. I don't think we're going to get what we want. And so my brother-in-law, Jarrett, said, hey, I think we can go down this aisle and we can sneak around the back and actually start grabbing the stuff now. I said, go check. So he runs back there and he checks and he's like, dude, yeah. So then there's a couple other people who are like, I'm going with them, So we're all back there and he's like moving some boxes and sliding between there and reaching and grabbing whatever it is. And well, there are other people on the other side doing some similar things. And I noticed their workers or I don't know if they saw us or whatever. But in my brain, I don't know why I did this. I don't know why, but it seemed like the right thing at the time. It's about 5-6 minutes until and I just, go, 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 go. I just start shouting this out. And people just start, fence goes down, people are climbing over. I am not lying. People are climbing up on the shelves and going over shelves to get around people. There are pallets of the generic stuff, like crock pots and stuff. Who wants that stuff? All up front. And so they're climbing up on the crock pots. People are shredding the stretch wrap off. it is absolute chaos. And that's one of those moments where I was like, bad idea. And I said to my brothers, I said, let's just grab our stuff and get. Just get it. Let's go. Because we were like, I've never seen such mad chaos in my life. We did get our items. We got out of there. And on the way home, we're like, dude, that was awesome. That was awesome. Next year, Black Friday, buy the ad, looking through it. Where are we going to go? Doesn't matter. We're going to Meijer. We go to Meijer. We walk into Meijer. And I asked the person working there, I said, hey, do you know where this item is? She said, yes, I do. She hands me a map. She says, items are located all throughout the store. You go down this aisle, you'll form the line in this aisle, this where if you want this item, you go here. You form here, you go here. If you want here, you go here. And had it all set up like this. And here's what I realized. I was realizing that they were making us prioritize what we wanted. And whatever was our priority was the path that we went down. And it affirmed the truth. The priorities you set determine the path you follow. The priority that you set in life will determine whatever path it is that you will begin to follow. If your priority is to get married, you will follow that path. If your priority is to find a career, you will follow that path. If your priority is to get fit and to get in shape, then you will follow that path, at least for a while. If your priority is to get a home, then you will begin heading down that path. You see, every priority that you set in life has a path that you will follow. But here's what I found to be true, is that chaos that we have in our life usually isn't because we don't have priorities set. It's because we have simply chosen the wrong priority. You see, we talk about priorities. People write these books all the time about priorities. Set your priorities. Priorities is actually an oxymoron. Because here's what it means. An oxymoron simply is saying this, that if it is a priority, you can't have priorities, otherwise you no longer have a priority if you have multiple priorities. A priority simply says, this is the most important thing. This is at the top of the list. And so many people are like, oh, you just have the wrong priorities. No, you have the wrong priority, singular, not plural. But often we get caught up in figuring out all the things that are important to us instead of saying, what is the one thing that is most important to me in life? And so choosing the right priority means this, that you have to use wisdom. Now, when I hear people talk to me about stuff like this, like, hey, James, you just got to be wise, or James, you got to be smarter than that, I say, that's the problem. I'm not real smart. Like, I wish that I were smarter than I am. I work with some people who are incredibly smart, and they know crazy facts about everything. They are so knowledgeable. Like, if you have Trivia Pursuit or you have that stuff, they can tell you every single thing ever. I'm just going to give you a little hint. If you ever went at Trivia Pursuit at our campus, if you know Tim Coble, you want him on your team. The dude knows everything. He knows everything. I'm not that. When I sit with him, I'm like, this guy's really smart, and I'm just not that smart. But here's the good part, and this is the good news for probably most of us in the room that are like myself, is you don't have to be smart in order to be wise. You see, you don't have to be smart in order to be wise. There is a difference. There's a difference between intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence and wisdom. There is a difference between them. Intelligence is simply, it is the accumulation of knowledge. Now, here's how you know this to be true. Some of you have had children, and your children have gone to school, and they get really good grades. I'm not sure what that's like, but that's a and the same thing is true for me. I mean, my kids take after me, and it drives me crazy. But here's the thing, like you have these kids, and they get 4.0 in school, or they do really well, or maybe you have some that have graduated high school, and they have their masters, and they're calling you up, and they're asking for money, or whatever it is, and you simply are sitting there saying, how can my kid, my child, be so incredibly intelligent and yet so incredibly stupid at the exact same time? Anybody understand? Don't raise your hand. Put your hands down. Your kids are sitting around you, for crying out loud. And so you're sitting there thinking like, oh my goodness, like my kid, if he just could think, and you learn that there is a difference between intelligence and wisdom. You see, intelligence is accumulation of knowledge, but wisdom is taking whatever little knowledge you may have, and it may not be much, but you put it into practice by using it and discernment or good judgment. That is what wisdom is. And wisdom is often found in the realm of decision making. When you are making decisions in life, wisdom is what is necessary. Now, when I was a sophomore in college, I was, at this point in my life, I was going to college to enter into ministry, which wasn't my original plan. My original plan was being a math teacher, and I just realized I'm not that smart. And so I ended up, somehow God used me. It's a long story. I shouldn't even started down that road. But enter ministry. And so I was going to a Bible college. And so I was a sophomore in college, and I had all of this incredible Bible knowledge. And I went to work for Stone Container, which is a cardboard box making factory. And it was in my hometown. I worked there in the summer, and during our break times, I would sit down with these guys that would work there, and we would begin engaging in conversations about a lot of different things, me hoping that I could lead them into a conversation about Bible, because I know more than any of y'all here about the Bible. Now, you may know more about boxes, and you may know more about machines and cars and all that. I know, and so I try to lead them there, and we'd get into these conversations. And all of a sudden, our conversations would quickly turn into arguments over non-important Bible things. We'd start arguing about crazy things like taking communion. Should we take communion every single week? Or should we have music? Or should we not have? And it's like these big theological, huge things, and they were just pointless. And most of the people who were sitting at the table were so turned off by the 2 or 3 of us that would have these conversations that they would get up and leave. But I thought I was brilliant. I thought, I'm so smart. And then one of my professors pointed this out. Do you know what it means to be a sophomore? And I said, no. And he said, it comes from 2 words. Sophos, moros. Sophos, pretty easy for us to figure out what that is, right? Like, that's where we get our word today, sophisticated. It's a Greek word, it comes from there. So when we get sophomore, it's sophos and moros, which is where we get our word moron. It's true. It's where we get it. And so what we have here is we have a wise fool, a sophisticated idiot. That's what sophomores are. Any sophomores in the room? Congratulations, And so here's the deal. Like, you realize that I'm nothing more than a wise fool. I knew enough to be really, really, really dangerous. There wasn't a lot of wisdom in there. I was accumulating a lot of knowledge. And that is where I realized that there is also a difference between wisdom and godly wisdom. Because you say, oh, he's so wise. But there's a difference between wisdom and godly wisdom. Here's what James, the Lord's brother, said. Jesus' brother said this. He said, who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom, so he's talking about this wisdom, is this bitter, selfish wisdom. So they make good decisions, good, shrewd business decisions. He said those kind of things, those don't come from heaven, but those are earthly. They are unspiritual, they are demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find, and the word here is disorder, which you could say chaos, and every evil practice. But he says this, but the wisdom that comes from heaven, the wisdom that comes from God, it is pure, it is peace-loving, it is considerate, it is submissive, it is full of mercy and good fruit, it is impartial, and it is sincere. You see, when God created the world, he created, and wisdom was part of the fabric of the world that he created. It's part of the natural order, and so wisdom is something that can be gained here on earth when you gain knowledge and you have experience, and the two of those things go together, and you start making good decisions. People will say, you are wise, and you can actually grow and develop in wisdom. But there is earthly wisdom and there is godly wisdom, and you have to grow in godly wisdom as well. It's not like it just naturally. Wisdom on earth doesn't just happen, like you grow in it over time. And the same thing is true when it comes to godly wisdom. You grow in it over time. King Solomon, thousands of years ago, said this about that. He said, he who walks with the wise becomes wise. He who walks with the wise, he who hangs out with wise people, becomes wise. Now, I asked a couple of volunteers to come up here. I asked Gail and my dad, who's actually in town, and it's my dad's birthday today. How about that? Yeah, so we're not going to sing happy birthday, but I wanted my dad to come up here because I love my dad. I tell lots of stories about my dad, and I'm blessed to have him as a father, and I'm grateful that he has another year of life. That's a good thing. So, was that weird? I'm sorry. So, Dad, I'm glad that you're alive.
Yeah, thank you.
So, okay. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have you each hold one end of this rope right here, and you're just going to stretch it out, and you're going to keep it pretty tight. Now, what I want us to see with this rope is what it represents. This rope is exactly 168 inches long. And so being 168 inches long, there is a lot of space, a lot of inches that are on this thing. And here's what it represents. It represents your life. Pretty exciting, huh? Some of you are like, man, a week in my life is like a 168-inch rope. That's true. So here's why. Because there are 168 hours in 1 week. In 1 week, there are 168 hours. Now, if we were to take this, you would say, okay, so I know that I probably sleep. I don't know. They say you should get at least 8 hours of sleep a night. Now, some of you are thinking, I would do anything for 8 hours of sleep a night. But 8 hours of sleep a night, 8 times 7, 56. Okay, so we're somewhere in this area right here is all gone because you're sleeping, which is good. You need sleep. You need rest. Take full advantage of that. There's probably for some of us in here, we have the people who are really ambitious, who are burners or whatever, and you work probably 60, 70, maybe more hours a week. First, I'd tell you, it's too many, just me telling you. But secondly, that's taking up a whole lot of your extra time during the week. Now, there's also some of us who work, 40 hours a week, and then there's some of us probably who work 20 hours a week, part-time job. If you were in the part-time world, great. If not, you might consider maybe increasing to 40. But anyhow, here's the deal, right? So we work how many hours, and we get to whatever. And so we have this much time left in our week. Now, the phrase that most of us say is this: I would do that, but I just don't have enough time. Yes. But we look and we go, but you actually have a lot of time. And you'd say, well, I have kids. You're right. So now, with what you have remaining here, so no. But there is true, right? Kids take up time. There's practices, there's all this stuff. Then there's some of us who try to get to the gym. And so we do that, but it's easy to talk us out of the gym if it's going to eat, and so we do all these different things. We're like, I've got this. And we don't have a ton of margin. Here's what's interesting. This little thing right here, which you can't see all that well, you'll see it better here in a second, but you can't see all this well, that is a 1-inch piece of tape. 1-inch piece of tape. And this 1-inch piece of tape represents the amount of time that you spend in church out of 168. Now, here's what I know. I know some people in the room, you read your Bible every day. And I know that some people attend maybe the women's ministry or the men's ministry, man challenge stuff, or you're involved in student ministry stuff. And so maybe you spend 2, 3, 4 hours a week having spiritual conversations, talking to people, growing in your faith, trying to learn godly wisdom, right? You have this many. But if you still look at that, it is far outweighed by everything else. And for some, one time a week in church is all you got. Now, back in 1980, they did a survey with Christian people, and they found that Christians typically attend church 3 to 4 times a month. So here's what I'm going to do, is we're going to add some time. We're going to increase this out to 1 month's worth of time. So if you'll take that, and you'll begin walking that way, and over here. Come back, Dad, come back. So what we're going to do is we're going to add this one here, and then add that one to that one right there. Yep, hook that in, and stretch that out. Now, this, stretch all the way out, this here represents 1 month's worth of time, and let's just say that this represents 4 weeks. In 2015, they did the same survey with Christian families, and they found that Christian families attend church 1.4 times per month. 1.4. Now, some of us in here would go, I feel like I'm at church a lot more than that. I bet if you go back and look at your calendar, you'll be surprised and say, yeah, maybe it's not that much. And I can tell you, I served in children's ministry here for 9 months while we were looking for somebody, and I can tell you there are kids that we would see once a month. And today, what's interesting enough is this is called being committed. And here's the problem with this. It's simply not enough. Now, when I was growing up, my dad was a pastor. And so my dad being a pastor, I was at church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and often during the week doing little activities that Dad would have for me. I remember one time where I asked Mom, do I have to go to church today? And Mom said, ask your dad. I asked my dad one time that question. I would tell you what he did to me, but he's still wearing a belt today. So here's the deal. This is what I knew about my parents. My parents, when it came to school, and I would say, do I have to go to school today? My parents would say, yes, you have to go to school today. Why? Because we care about your future. And yet, if I asked my dad and Mom, I said, Mom, Dad, do I have to go to church today? Which I did one time. They were like, yes, it is mandatory for you. And I would say, why? And they would say, because we care about your eternity. And it's sad to me that sometimes we're more concerned about our kids and our children being successful by the world's standards and less concerned about their eternity, which requires a very small amount of time. And here's what's interesting. If you were to take this and represent eternity, it never ends. But our life, it eventually does. Again, thanks for your help. You can set that down. You can head back to your seats. Again, it comes back to you. What is your priority? You have to ask yourself, what is the priority for me and for my life and for my family? Check this out. If it's true that he who walks with the wise becomes wise, then we could also say that he who walks with the world becomes like the world. And it's not just me up here saying that. Here's some research that was done by a guy named Moran, Surf Moran. And he's a professor at Northwestern University, and he's done some research on the brain, and his research is fascinating when it comes to decision-making. And he said this: decision-making is filled with biases that cloud our judgment. People misremember bad experiences good, and vice versa. They let their emotions turn their rational choices into irrational ones, and they use social cues, even subconsciously, to make choices they would otherwise avoid. So here's what he's saying. He's saying that we are so influenced by the people that we are around that we will actually participate in things that we wouldn't normally participate in. There are things that we would say, I would never in a million years do that. You get around the right people and you'll do it. And there are even some times where we have done some things that we have said, this was awful. I will never do that again. You get down the road a little bit, you get around people and they'll be like, hey, do you remember when we did that? Was so fun. Let's do it again. And you're like, it was fun. And you're like, what? No. And so you participate in things. He goes on and says, when two people are in each other's company, their brain waves will begin to look nearly identical. When you're in the same company with other people, your brain waves will start to look like the person that you're around. So here's what I'd tell you, just a little quick thing. Don't hang out with me because you'll look dumb. Like, it's crazy to think about. Like, when you're around these people, you end up like what? Our brain? Yes. And he continues. He said, the more we study engagement, this was a 10-year research that was done. The more we study engagement, we see time and again that just being next to certain people actually aligns your brain with them based on their mannerisms, the smell of the room, the noise level, and many other factors, Surf said. This means that people who you hang out with actually long enough will have an impact on your engagement with reality beyond what you can explain. And one of the effects is this: you become alike. So here's the deal. Who you spend your time with matters. The Apostle Paul said this, that bad company corrupts good character. Now, a lot of times when I was younger, the people would present this verse and say, don't hang out with bad people because they corrupt good character. I don't think that that's what Paul was saying. I think what Paul was saying this: if you spend all of your time with people of bad character, it will eventually begin to affect yours, even when you don't want it to. If you spend all your time with people who influence you to do something, even when you go and say, I'm not going to do that because I am this or that, or eventually what happens is you begin to give in because your minds begin to align with them, and you end up becoming like they are. And I think what the Apostle Paul was saying here, be aware of this. If you spend the bulk of your time with people who are influencing you to do things like the world, you're going to become like the world. If you spend your time with people who do things to glorify God, then you eventually are going to glorify God. And that is why it's so critical and so important that we spend time together as Christians talking and sharing our belief with one another. And here's the deal. There are a lot of people who will enter into this room who will go, I don't believe any of this. But by spending enough time with us and seeing the joy in who we are, it will begin to influence who they are. And they'll find this joy and they'll be like, I don't even know why I'm around you guys. I'm so happy because I disagree with everything you believe. It's crazy, but it happens all the time. And here's what we know. When you let the world set priorities for you, your priorities will change consistently. And Jesus reminds us of this, that when we choose all these different priorities that the world gives us, what we are left with is not one single priority, but what we are left with is worry. Because you worry about what you prioritize. If your priority is money, that's all you think about. If it's your clothes, that's all you think. If it's food, it's all you think about. And so Jesus even says this in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. He says this, therefore, and whenever you see a therefore, you have to ask yourself, what is the therefore? That's what it means. And so you look at the passage right above it, and Jesus had just completed talking about money. And he said, here's the deal. You can serve God or you serve money, but you can't serve both. You have to choose between serving God and serving money. And if you try to serve both, what will end up happening is you will be miserable. And a lot of the chaos that happens in the world today is because of money. It's because there are marriages that are in chaos because of money. There are nations that are in chaos because of money. There are businesses that are in chaos because of money. There are people in this room whose lives feel like they're spinning out of control because of money. And Jesus says you can't serve both God and money. It's frustrating. It's exhausting. You can't have two bosses. And then he goes on, he says, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you'll eat, what you'll drink, or your body, what you'll wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet their heavenly Father feeds them. And I ask myself this question, how can the chaos of the world be the calm for Jesus? Like, how can Jesus be so calm in this, and yet everyone else around is chaos? I mean, they're asking him questions about money and about life and about food and all these things, and yet Jesus remains completely calm in all this. What about the time when the disciples were in the boat and the waves were crashing in and they all thought they were going to die and they were in this crazy panic and they wake Jesus up? He's sleeping. Jesus, wake up. And they wake him up and he's like, what? And they said, don't you care? Don't you care? We're going to die. And he's taking a nap. How can their chaos be his calm? And the answer is this: It's different priorities. I shouldn't say priorities, a different priority. His priority wasn't his life. That wasn't his priority. And this, as he goes on, Jesus goes on and says, "Are you not much more valuable than they," meaning the birds? "Can any one of you add a single hour to your life?" You see, Jesus already knows all the arguments that we're going to throw his way. He knows what we're about to say next. He knows all about our whatabouts. Well, what about my life? What about my food? What about my clothes? What about my retirement? What about my marriage? What about my kids? What about my education? What about this? What about that? What about all these different things that we're worried about that are our priority because we have priorities. We don't have a singular priority, and we're throwing out all these whatabouts. And it's in our whatabouts that we have to remember our priority. And Jesus says, you got to use wisdom when you choose your priority. And it might be worth us remembering that when it comes to us choosing and prioritizing, we're not always the best at it. And so it's important for us to have somebody who knows us really, really well to set the priority for us. And there's nobody who knows you better than God. And the truth is this: God sees you. God sees everything that you're going through. He sees your marriage. He sees you at work. He sees you on your drive here. He knows what you're listening to in the car. He sees it all. He sees your health. He sees your health scans. He sees all those things. And here's what Jesus said, that God cares about the birds in the air. And if he cares about the birds in the air, don't you think he cares about you? He sees you. And then he goes on, Jesus continues on, verse 20, it says, "And why do you worry about your clothes? See the flowers in the field, they do not labor or spin, yet I tell you that not even Solomon, the King Solomon, the richest man to ever walk the face of the earth, in all of his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So don't worry saying, what shall I eat, or what shall I drink, or what shall I wear?" The culture that we live in today is constantly encouraging us to take more and more on. They say take more responsibility on, more debt, more challenges, more opinions. You need to be more open-minded. You need more money. You need more partying. You need more. Whatever it is, more. You put it in there. You need more. But when we fall flat on our faces because we keep trying so hard to keep up with the world says this is what we need, then the same culture crushes us for being too careless, too opinionated, too open-minded, too far in debt, too greedy, too whatever you put it in there, you're too that. And here's what ends up happening. We constantly are worrying on both fronts. Am I to this or am I to that? Am I to this or am I to that? And just constantly walking around with this anxiety. You see, in the game of worry, you always lose, every time. You lose your mind, you lose your health, you lose what matters most, possibly your marriage or your children or your job, because you're just so consumed with worry. And what we realize from Jesus is that worry is not a modern problem. It's not something that's just been brought about recently with technology or politics or global tensions or the pace of life that we live now. It's not an American problem. It's not something that just Americans struggle with. It's not a socioeconomic problem or a millennial problem. It's 100% a spiritual problem. And the problem with it is this, is we always seek to find a solution in what the world says is the next best, the next greatest, the next self-help, whatever it is. And to find a solution in anything like that is like trying to treat fatigue with coffee instead of rest. All you're doing is amping it up more and wearing the person out more. And eventually you're delaying and dampening the problem until there's a real major crisis. And so not only does God see you, but also God wants you to have a priority because he cares about you. Too many times we get our comforts that happen in this world right now confused with a God who doesn't care about me. So if something happens to me right now that causes discomfort in my life, we immediately turn and say, see, God doesn't care about me. But that couldn't be further from the truth. The difference is God's focus is actually not the here and now as far as your comforts. Those are to come. in paradise. He is more concerned about eternity than he is the here and now. Don't get me wrong. He wants you to live wise right now. He wants to be the priority right now. But he's far more concerned about your eternity. And he says, if God takes care of birds and he clothes flowers, then you know he cares about you. And then it says, verse 32, the pagans run after all these things. So this is how the pagans, the people who don't know Jesus, this is how they live their life. And your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But he says this, but seek first, your priority, your singular priority is God's kingdom and his righteousness. And all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. I love what Andy Stanley said. He said, I'm not worried about tomorrow because I'm trusting the only one who can do anything about my tomorrow. You see, the God that we serve and love, he knows what's best for you. He really does. And he knew the best thing for you was to seek him first and his righteousness. That word righteousness means it's a relational word, and it means right relationship with God. And the Bible teaches us the only way that you can have a right relationship with God is through Jesus Christ. There is no other way for you to be in a right relationship with him. It doesn't matter how good you are. Many times people think righteousness is good behavior. Righteousness is not good behavior. Righteousness is being in a right relationship with God. And Scripture teaches us the only way that you receive that righteousness is through Jesus Christ. You actually take upon yourself his righteousness. So when God looks down at you, he sees his perfect Son who has clothed you. That's what it means. And he's saying, so seek me first and my kingdom. Start living for me now, right now. And then he says, and the crazy thing is all these other things will be added unto you. Like the things that you thought were so important, some of those are just going to dissipate. And all of a sudden, the thing that is most important in your life is going to be added to you, and the other things are going to fall into place. And all of a sudden, you're going to be left with joy and peace that you'd never experienced before. Seek him first. Make him the priority of your life. And everything else, the worry that this world throws at you, will fall into place. And when you hang out with Jesus and his people, guess what? You become wise. Not necessarily smart. People are going to go, that guy's stupid. He does crazy stuff. Yeah, because I love people, I'm going to do some stupid, crazy things because that's what God called me to do. And the world's going to say you're foolish. But we're not worried about earthly wisdom that's demonic. We're worried about godly wisdom. As James said, here's the deal. I don't know about you, but I would gladly give away the world's chaos for the wisdom that comes from God. Let me pray. God, we just love you. And God, we're thankful for the truth of your word. And God, I know that there are some in this room who maybe hear this stuff and go, okay, whatever. But then there are also some in this room who say, yeah, I've prioritized a ton of things in my life, and I feel more confused and more lost than ever. And the things that were a priority today, tomorrow, they're not a priority. And God, so many times we spend our time prioritizing things that will pass away. We worry about our clothes, they get old and they go out of style. We worry about our body and the way it looks, and unfortunately, we get older. And we worry about our food that we're going to eat, and then we get hungry again. We worry about our money, and eventually it will run dry. And so, God, would we stop worrying about those things because we've prioritized them above you? And would we turn our hearts and say, God, you are the priority of our life. I want to have a right relationship with you, and I will begin living your kingdom now. And in doing so, we'll be part of the wisest people that ever walked the face of the earth, and those are the ones who acknowledge you. So God, we love you, and we're thankful for Jesus, and it's in his name we pray. Amen.